So here we go then, Mayo and Tyrone in an All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final. I mean, you never would have predicted it. I mean, certainly not at the start of the year anyways. I don't think anyone really had Mayo and Tyrone. Like, no pundits, no fans. Like, a lot of people definitely didn't. I know maybe people in Mayo and Tyrone always believed in their county, always believed that they always had the potential to go and get to the All-Ireland final and end the wait for Sam Maguire. Obviously, Tyrone looking to end the 13-year wait since 2008, and as we very well know, Mayo looking to end that 70-year wait since an All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final. And it is mad to think that it is these two going into an All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final. I mean, I still can't really get my head around it, that it is these two in the final. I mean, but you have to say, very well deserved. I mean, Mayo were the better side on the day against Dublin. They were fantastic, really from 63 minutes onwards. Actually, for the opening hour, they were actually quite poor, but they stuck with Dublin, and their defensive display was always brilliant, and I think that was something that was always most impressive about Mayo. As for Tyrone, I mean, they were fantastic against Kerry, like no two ways about it. I know I maybe upset some Tyrone fans when I was saying, Tyrone were bringing Kerry down to their level. I suppose what I meant more by that, I mean, maybe it was just bad choice of words on my end, but I think more so what I meant by that was more like Tyrone's game plan worked perfectly. Not necessarily dragging them down to their level in terms of Kerry's level is all the way up here and Tyrone are down here. I just personally feel like if that game was a straight shootout, Kerry would have won the game, because I do think Kerry have the better forwards. They have the players that can be scoring from distance. They have the players that can be, running off the shoulder and playing this dynamic attacking football. Not to say that Tyrone don't do so. Tyrone do have players that can do that, but Kerry have better players than doing that. And I think Tyrone needed to have a different game plan. They needed to, what I was saying was drag Kerry down to their own level in terms of making it a physical fight, making it a battle, making it tough, making it physical. And Tyrone did that. And they also, worked on the counter-attack. They worked to beat Kerry on the counter-attack, to get men forward and break with pace. And it worked perfectly. And actually, in many ways, it reminded me so much of when Dublin played Donegal in 2014. And Donegal were breaking time and time again with pace, just short hand pass and getting players forward. And it was very tough for Dublin to deal with. And in a similar fashion, Dublin had an all-out attack in that game. And their strategy really going into that year, really, was all-out attack. It doesn't matter about our defence, because we have the forwards and we have the players to outscore you, and once we keep doing that, we will win. And Kerry probably had something similar this year, and as they came up against Tyrone, they very much found out that strategy doesn't work in Gaelic football, not anymore anyways. Like, you need to have a strong defence, and Tyrone very much, done what they had to do in that game to win the game, and Mayo as well, like, stuck with Dublin very much for the majority of the game. They stuck with Dublin, and it paid off. It paid dividends, and it was absolutely perfect. And you'd have to say full credit has to go to Mayo on that particular occasion for winning the game, and full credit to Tyrone. And here we go, both of them in an All-Ireland Senior Football Championship final. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I cannot call this game. I change my mind every 10 minutes. Every 20 minutes I'm changing my mind. I'm thinking, like, I want Mayo to win personally, because, it's been 70 years since they've won the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. And, they've got to so many finals, and I just feel like they deserve to have their day, like, especially the fans. At the same time, though, there is a part of me that's worried that we'll never hear the end of it if Mayo win. Like, as a Dublin fan, I'm kind of thinking, like, is this going to be talked about for years and years to come? I mean, it will, because, you win your first All-Ireland after 70 years, you have all this heartbreak along the way, and it's always, sometimes it's not about the success, it's about the journey to the success. And I think, fair enough if Mayo fans go on about it for years and years to come. I mean, they've probably earned it, but there is a part of me that kind of just, that's kind of worried we'll never hear the end of it. But yeah, I do want them to win. Do I think they'll win, though? I suppose that's a different question, isn't it? And we'll get into the preview now, and we'll really break down this game. Like, I am surprised. I had a look at the odds on a number of different websites. I mean, I'm not a betting man, by any means. I don't really place bets or anything like that. I just don't really see the value or the point in it. And, but I did go and have a look, because I was curious to see, like, who is the favourites going into this game? Like, who are the odds going with? And I had a look on oddschecker.com, where it just compares all the different betting companies and shows who's the favourites and who isn't. And look, listen, we shouldn't always go with the odds, the betting companies. I mean, they had Kerry as massive favourites going in against Tyrone, and we've seen how that one worked out. And Dublin were obviously favourites against Mayo as well, and that didn't quite work out either. But Mayo are going in as big favourites in this game, and I'm a little bit surprised by that, to be perfectly honest. Like, Mayo are going in as, like, I was seeing there was a graph on the website, and it was saying that 61% of bets have been in favour of Mayo winning, whereas I think 28% are for Tyrone and 11% are a draw. A little bit surprised by that, to be perfectly honest. I don't see Mayo going in as the favourites, in my opinion. I see Tyrone going in as favourites. I think Tyrone have had a tougher route to the final, in my opinion, and they've played very well doing so. Like, Mayo have had big patches of games where they haven't played well. Like against Dublin, for example, they were actually very poor for about 60 minutes. And you forget that, like, you know, it was really up until the Diarmuid O'Connor flick from Robert Hennelly's 45 where Mayo really started to turn it on. Now, it is worth saying that Mayo done a brilliant job defensively, and that's what kept them in the game. But going forward, they were really poor. Like, Aidan O'Shea was missing a lot of chances. It took a while before Tommy Conroy and Ryan O'Donoghue started to come more into the game. We didn't really see the forward runs of Manny Rowan or some of the Mayo wingbacks as well. I mean, in fairness, they were doing a brilliant job defensively, so that was mainly why. And James Carr, who even came off the bench for Aidan O'Shea, didn't score. I mean, he made a lot happen, but he didn't score. So it took a while really for Mayo to get going in the game, and it really wasn't until the last 6 or 7 minutes in that game. And you think back to Galway as well, very poor in the first half. In the second half, brilliant, turned the tide, brilliant second half performance. They obviously get a couple of goals and turn the game on its head. But you would wonder, if they play that poorly against Tyrone in this final, will they get away with it? I'm not too sure that they will. I think Tyrone will punish them. And you could say, all right, Mayo will learn their lessons and they'll come back and they'll be stronger. But there's so many permutations and so many factors that go into this, and it really is what makes this such a hard final to call. And I'm going to be perfectly honest, I have no idea which way this final is going to go.
Well, nowadays you got to have that.
Before we get straight into the podcast, I just want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors, Declan Kirby GAA Star. Declan Kirby GAA Star Championship Journey. It's a series of GAA team children's books written by primary school teacher and GAA coach Michael Egan. You can check it out in the link in the description down below, of course, as well. Follow the trials and tribulations of Declan Kirby and his team at Smithgreen Gaelic Football Club, recently formed but promising GAA team. The book is now available in Easons and all good bookshops, so check it out in the description down below, and let's get straight into it. What's the story, everyone? Welcome back to GAA Fan TV. I hope you're all keeping wonderfully well. This is the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship preview and prediction, and here we go, the final game in the GAA calendar for 2021, at least at inter-county level anyways. We do have the Camogie final as well, that's happening this weekend, but in terms of Gaelic football, this is the last game happening this weekend, and to be perfectly honest, I mean, it's mad. You know, it feels like the year has just flown by, and here we go, the All-Ireland final is here, you know, for us to watch. And Mayo and Tyrone in a final, like what I said in the preview or in the introduction there, I just can't quite get my head around that it's these two in the final. And you know what's actually interesting is, like, in fairness, I actually think it is very fitting that it is these two counties in the All-Ireland final, because personally I do think that over the past decade these two have been the closest to beating Dublin. You know, in the past 6 years these have been the two teams that have been, you know, okay, yes, fair enough, Kerry came closer in 2019 to beating Dublin, but Mayo and Tyrone, they've always been thereabouts. Like, they've always been so close. Semi-finals, finals, like Tyrone in 2018. Mayo have obviously been in a whole host of finals over the past decade. You know, 2012, 2013, 2016, 2017, 2020, and now 2021. I mean, it's just mad the amount of finals that they've been to. And I suppose for Tyrone, like, just the one final in 2018, but always very close in semi-finals. 2016 they were in a semi-final, 2017 as well. And they've been two counties that have been very, very close down the years, and it probably is very fitting that it is going to be one of them that essentially, you know, wins the All-Ireland after Dublin's 6 in a row. I know Mayo went and ended Dublin's reign, but winning the All-Ireland is what matters, and it will be what people speak about. I mean, Mayo fans will have their moment, and they'll certainly always talk about that victory over Dublin, but if they don't get over the line against Tyrone, I mean, it's an interesting one, and maybe some Mayo fans can let me know down in the comments below. Like, if you lose this final, is it still a success? Like, is the season still one you'll remember? I mean, you beat Dublin, fair enough, but I don't know, like, there's a lot of questions there, and certainly for Mayo fans, I'm sure they're only thinking about this game at the moment, but it is an interesting one, no doubt about it. And these two teams have only played each other 4 times actually since the turn of the millennium, which is what makes this game very fascinating as well, because these two counties, for, you know, like what I said there, they've always been thereabouts or closer, All-Ireland semi-finals, finals, but they just haven't played each other that much over the past 20 years or so, which is quite funny really. When you even think back to the mid-2000s, like, Mayo reached 2 All-Ireland finals, Tyrone were in 3 All-Ireland finals and won them. Mayo obviously didn't win theirs, and these two counties were always sort of there or thereabouts, but they just seem to avoid each other. Like Mayo seemed to come good in the years that Tyrone, where, obviously Tyrone struggled to win 2 All-Irelands in a row, and obviously they had that horrific, tragedy back in 2004 where Cormac McAnallen passed away, and obviously that had a huge bearing on the Tyrone team, no doubt about it, not just that year, for many years to come. Mayo obviously beat them in 2004. Tyrone, I suppose, got a bit of a delayed revenge in 2008 when they beat Mayo in the qualifiers. That actually being Tyrone's only win over Mayo since the turn of millennium. And actually, interesting enough, Tyrone also beat Kerry that year in the final. So the last time Tyrone beat Mayo and Kerry in the same season, they won the All-Ireland. And if they beat Mayo on Saturday, they will have done the same again. As for Mayo, they beat Tyrone, as we said, 2004. 2013 and 2016 as well. The 2016 All-Ireland quarter-final, the most recent game between these two. So, like, two counties that just haven't played each other that much through the years. Probably the game actually worth citing between Mayo and Tyrone, and probably a game actually worth discussing, was actually the game last year in the National Football League, the final game of the 2020 National Football League. And although, Tyrone have changed their management since then, Mickey Hart was in charge back then, it was their most recent meeting, and it was actually a game where there was a lot on the line. Mayo and Tyrone played each other. Tyrone actually won the game 3-14 to 19 points. Mayo were obviously trying to avoid being relegated to Division 2. They obviously hadn't been relegated in quite a long time, 20 odd years, and Tyrone obviously wanted to preserve their status in Division 1, and Tyrone won that game. And interesting enough, like, both sets of players will probably both be playing in this game as well. Like, you look back at some of the scores that day in particular, like, for example, Mayo had the likes of Oisin Mullen playing. You had Owen McLaughlin who played that day, Paddy Durkin as well. Tommy Conroy scored 1-3 that day. Aidan O'Shea played. Darren Cohn actually played and scored 5 points. Jeremy O'Connor with 2 points that day as well. So interesting, and Ryan O'Donoghue, he came off the bench that day as well, scoring 2 points. Tyrone in particular, looking at the team they lined up, obviously they didn't have Cathal McShane because he had his injury at that moment in time. But Conor McKenna, you'll remember, had a brilliant game. Probably actually Conor McKenna's best performance in a Tyrone jersey, since he came back from AFL, was probably against Mayo. He scored 2-2 that day, scored a free as well. I remember terrorised the Mayo defence, caused all sorts of problems, and he had a terrific game that day. And that will be an interesting one, because who is going to pick up Conor McKenna? Who is going to mark him? Will Oisin Mullen come back in and do a job on him? Will it be Padraig O'Hara? Will Cathal McShane start and maybe Padraig O'Hara will go on him? There's a lot of permutations and there's a lot of questions, and Conor McKenna had a very good game against Mayo last year in that National League game. And Kieran McGeary scored a point that day. Peter Hart was brilliant at getting forward. I remember he won man of the match, I think, that day as well, scoring 3 points. And Dereck Canavan came off the bench and scored 1-1. So, like, that's really kind of the only game you can go off between these two counties in recent seasons. And Tyrone won that game. Now, you would say that was a National Football League game. This is an All-Ireland final. It's completely different. I do agree. Now, in terms of how this game is going to go, I'm going to be perfectly honest. I'm struggling to really sort of break down how I see this game going. I mean, it could go a number of different ways. I mean, will it be a shootout? Will both sides be trading blow for blow? And will we see all-out brilliant attacking football? Personally, I don't think so. I actually think this game has the potential to be quite a low-scoring game, because, like, it's such a big game. And it's, as many people have said in previous podcasts, other podcasts, I've listened to a few different podcasts on the build-up to this final, this is bigger than an All-Ireland final in many ways, because you're talking about two counties that are looking to end a big way for an All-Ireland final. This would be huge for either county. Like, for Tyrone, for Brian Dooher and Fergal Logan to come in as managers, and in their first season win an All-Ireland, I mean, that's the stuff of legend. I mean, that would be an extraordinary achievement, and I really do feel that if they were to go and win the All-Ireland, that it would be such a huge bonus for them to have that monkey off their back. They would be serious contenders again next year, and you wouldn't rule them out winning it again, because they have the players to do so, and they now have the belief of beating a Kerry, beating a Mayo. They've young players coming through at the moment as well. Cathal McShane will be back fully fit next year. I mean, Tyrone could really, really dominate over the next couple of years if they win this. Like, there's no, I'm not going to say that I'm not saying they're going to win 5 in a row, or they're going to, win 2 or 3 back to back, but I think they're going to be a serious proposition every year. Mayo, on the other hand side of things, if they win the All-Ireland, I actually think they'd probably have a massive hangover next year, in fairness, because it's such a huge achievement, and it would be, you think of when Dublin won the All-Ireland in 2011, and then 2012 they had a massive hangover, they were nowhere near their best, and regrouped in 2013 and won it. I think something similar would probably happen with Mayo. They'd probably, not win it next year, but they'd still be a serious proposition, and they still would have that monkey off their back and be thereabouts. And there'd be a different quantity about Mayo with the fact that they now have that All-Ireland. They now have it in them to go and win it. It's such a huge All-Ireland. It's such a huge game. And I think there'll be a lot of nerves out there. I think there'll be a lot of pressure. I think there'll be a lot of players that don't want to make mistakes. I think it's going to be cagey. I think it's going to be low scoring. Will there be goals? There is a potential there might not be goals in this final, but at the same time, I could see Tyrone breaking on the counter attack, and probably if they get goal opportunities, they'll probably score. I don't see Mayo scoring a goal in this game, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they might not need to score a goal, but I don't see it happening. I think Tyrone, they were brilliant against Kerry defensively, and I think if they play it in a similar way against Kerry then in this Mayo game, I think they'll have a lot of joy. Like Kieran McGeary dropping back, Noel Sludden dropping back, Padraig Hampsey, one of the best defenders so far this year, definitely in contention with winning an All-Star in my opinion. Peter Hart's been absolutely brilliant as well. And Conor Moyler's done a fantastic job in and around the full back line when he's played in there as well. He's been fantastic from a Tyrone point of view. So, and Tyrone's physicality and energy, and it'll be interesting to see how Mayo deal with that. It really, really will, because Kerry really struggled, and you've seen in a lot of times in that game as well, when Kerry had the ball, they were working it from side to side with Stephen O'Brien and Clifford and Paddy Clifford. They've done a fantastic job of just sort of running Kerry out over the sideline, just forcing them out over the sideline, sort of leading them into, pockets of space and then pressing with 2 or 3 men. It was brilliant stuff, and it was a fantastic defensive display from Tyrone. And like what I said in the preview, that was kind of what I meant when I was saying that they sort of dragged them down to their level, because they made it a fight, they made it a physical battle, and Kerry didn't have it in them to come through that. And I think that's why Tyrone ultimately went on to win the game. And normally for these games, you would have seen, if anyone watched my semi-final breakdown for both the Kerry and Tyrone game and Mayo and Dublin, you would have seen, we were looking at visual tactics boards and whatnot. I've decided not to do that for this final, because there's so many different ways that this game could go. It could be cagey, but if there's an early goal, it could completely open up the game. All of a sudden then, both sides are on the attack. It could be very interesting. And if Mayo, get an early goal and they build up a lead, will they drop back and then try and defend it? I don't think they have it within themselves to do that either. So then that would force Tyrone to play on the front foot. There's a lot of different ways that this game could go. And I would say that the opening 10 to 15 minutes could be the most important in this game, because if Tyrone build up a lead, for example, if they start fast and Mayo start poorly, and Tyrone, work up a lead, and let's say, for example, it's 1-2 to 1 or something like that, you could see Tyrone being very good defensively, getting men behind the ball, really frustrating Mayo, forcing Mayo to kick from distance, forcing Mayo to try and float long balls into Aidan O'Shea, like what they done against the Dubs, for example. And then all of a sudden, it starts to become a struggle for Mayo. Will Mayo have that same energy that they had in the second half against the Dubs? I mean, they've had a long layoff, they've had a 4-week break coming into this game, but would Tyrone allow them to come back into the game? Because let's not forget, Dublin were so poor in that second half, 3 points in that second half. They didn't score any up until after the water break or something like that. Anyways, 1 point in extra time. Would Tyrone be as poor as that? Personally, I just don't think so. I really don't. I think they're going to have a game plan, and when they're breaking forward with Conor McKenna, and Darren McCurry as well, and you'll see Matty Donnelly doing all the work that he does as well in and around the midfield and getting forward with the short hand passes and whatnot. I could see them just causing problems for Mayo, in all honesty. Really do think there's going to be fine margins between this, 1 or 2 points. I suppose Colin McShane, well, I suppose let's discuss that very briefly, because does he start, does he not start? I mean, that's a big question, isn't it? Because he hasn't started any games this year. He's obviously had a lot of injuries. There will be a podcast out tomorrow with Daniel Hussey of Tackle and Sport, and we really discussed this in further detail and broke down the game in a podcast, an hour and a half long. So I do recommend anyone to check that out tomorrow if you want more build-up and previews ahead of the game. But in terms of Colin McShane, I was about to speak about Aidan O'Shea and whether he starts, and we'll discuss that in a moment. For Colin McShane, I do personally feel like having him come off the bench is a trump card. It's such a big player to bring off the bench. If you start him and it's not working, maybe you take him off and bring him back on. Maybe it's Peter Canavan all over again. I don't know, but it would be interesting to see. And maybe for Tyrone fans watching this, maybe you can let me know down in the comments below. Should Colin McShane start? In my opinion, I think I think things are already working well, like with your forward line, with Darren McCurry, with Conor McKenna. Like, who do you take out? Do you take out Matty Donnelly? Personally, I don't think so. Do you then put Colin McShane in around the half forward line? Personally, again, I don't think so. Do you drop Niall Sludden and put him in? I don't know. Like, there's a lot of permutations there, and I just think having him come off the bench, because I think it will be close. I don't think we'll see a situation where Mayo go into a 10-point lead or anything like that. I mean, I could be perfectly wrong. I can, now that I'm saying that, that's probably what will happen. But I don't see that happening. So I think bringing Colin McShane on for the final 15 minutes and maybe extra time, I think that would just be such a big addition of a player to bring off the bench, and that could be a huge trump card. So, I mean, that's another interesting question, and it will certainly be interesting to see what happens there. Anyways, Mayo, how do they win this game? And like what I was saying before, they need to start the game fast. They need to come, flying out of the traps. And does Aidan O'Shea start? That is the big question, isn't it? Because, it's interesting with Aidan O'Shea, isn't it? You've one set of fans who say he's, overrated, he's not good enough, he doesn't bring any value to this Mayo side. And then there's another bunch that say he's brilliant, he needs to start, he's one of the best players in this Mayo team. I mean, it's a hard one to judge with Aidan O'Shea. I mean, personally, from watching him down the years, I always feel like he does a lot right, but it's just like that final decision doesn't go in his favour. And sometimes it might be bad luck, sometimes it might be just a lack of quality, and sometimes maybe it just doesn't work out for him on the day. Like, for example, against Dublin in the first half, there's a long ball that gets floated in, he catches ahead of Mick Fitzsimons, turns him inside and out, hits it with his left boot, and it goes wide. If that goes over, it would have been an unbelievable score. The fans would have been on their feet, and maybe Aidan O'Shea would have had a completely different game, and maybe the game would have been different, because then maybe he would have played for the whole game. I don't know, but it is interesting with Aidan O'Shea, and like, does he start? Does James Horan have the balls to drop him? Personally, I think Mayo should start him, because I think he's not a player. He isn't a Cillian O'Connor type player. Like, he isn't a player that's gonna score 1-7, 1-8, 1-9 or anything like that, and be your top scorer on the day. But he is a very physical player. He is a player that can shrug off challenges, that can take hits, that can give hits himself. And I think, considering how physical that Tyrone defence is, like, Kerry probably could have needed someone like that. For example, they probably needed someone like a Kieran Donaghy, and Aidan O'Shea can probably do that. Now, do you float long balls into him? Probably not, because I think that tactic has been overdone at this stage, and I think it's very common that you just float long balls into Aidan O'Shea. He catches the ball, maybe he lays the ball off or works a goal chance or something like that. I think Tyrone will be dead wide to that, and I just don't see how that would work. But I do think Aidan O'Shea could have some sort of an impact in this game, and whether you name him in a full forward or in and around the full forward line, and then he drops in more into midfield and kind of plays a free role, I think he'd have more of an impact like that. A bit like Michael Murphy, for example. And personally, like, I think Aidan O'Shea could actually have a brilliant game in this. I think he could right the critics wrong. He could be man of the match, and he could, it could be the ultimate Mayo fairy tale story, where Aidan O'Shea has a dreadful game against Dublin, gets subbed off, comes back on, is there on the pitch when he beat Dublin, goes on to the final, wins man of the match, and lifts Sam Maguire. I mean, it could be the ultimate fairy tale, couldn't it, for Mayo fans? And there's a part of me that kind of feels like it could happen. It really could. Like, Aidan O'Shea could win man of the match. I don't know. It's crazy. And there's a lot of permutations, because who marks Aidan O'Shea? Could it be Kieran McGeary maybe going on him? That would be very interesting. Could we see a situation where Peter Hart goes on him? Like, a lot of very good questions. We've then got Tommy Conroy as well, who's very explosive and loves running off the shoulder, getting in and around spaces. And we did see, though, like, when Kerry were trying that, David Clifford was really the only player on the pitch who had joy. Sean O'Shea was getting a bit of joy as well, to be fair to him. Stephen O'Brien struggled massively. Paul Gainey struggled to get into the game as well. Paddy Clifford, thought Conor Myler done a great job on him that day as well. He didn't quite have the same impact he had in Munster Championship games and in National League games. So it is interesting to see what will happen there as well, with the likes of Tommy Conroy, Ryan O'Donoghue. I do think Mayo are going to have to be patient on the ball as well. Like, they can't rush chances. They can't rush chances wide, or do what they were doing in the first half against the Dubs, where they were snatching at opportunities and hitting chances from distance. So I do think they're going to have to be patient in that kind of essence of the game. And like what we were saying before in terms of Tyrone and how they win this game, obviously breaking forward on the counter attack, getting men forward as well, like breaking with pace, something similar to what they done with Kerry, obviously, when Conor McKenna got his goal, Colin McShane as well. Like, they will try and work the ball very, very quickly and get forward and get on the attack, but at the same time, they will need to be patient. Like, they don't want to just turn over the ball to Mayo. I mean, as we very well seen against Kerry, they scored 2-9 from turnovers, so, turning the ball over and breaking with pace will certainly be something that Tyrone will look to do. I do think Mayo, on the other hand side of things, I don't think they'll fall into the trap as much as Kerry did. We've seen Kerry, they still played that same way as if they were playing a Cork or a Tipperary. They were still pushing cornerbacks forward. We still seen Brian O'Bugalock getting forward. Gavin White was still getting forward as well. They stopped doing it a little bit in the second half in extra time, but in particular in the first half, we've seen that happening quite a lot. Will Mayo fall into that same trap? Personally, I don't think so, because we've seen against Dublin, Paddy Durkin and Owen McLaughlin weren't getting as far forward. They were holding a lot more. So, Tyrone will need to be patient in defence as well, and they'll need to break forward when they get the ball, and that will certainly be one worth keeping an eye on as well. Is the quality going to be there in this game? I think there will be quality there, no doubt about that, but I just don't think it will be free-flowing or attacking or end for end. I mean, unless, it's going down to the wire and there's 2 points in it and one team needs to show their hand. But I do think, both sides will stick with each other very, very close for the entirety of the 70 minutes. And Mayo's defence will be an interesting one as well, because, when I was watching them in the National League, I thought Mayo's defence were really struggling. Against Clare, I think they conceded 2-18 in that game, or 2-11 or something like that. They struggled massively in the second half. They do seem quite vulnerable under a high ball. We've seen Robert Henley against Galway, for example, got caught under a high ball, so that will be an interesting one as well. So it will be interesting to see how Mayo's defence cope with that, forward attacking runs of Tyrone. How will Padraig O'Hara get on? He's been fantastic so far this year for Mayo, no doubt about it. It was unbelievable in the semi-final when he was marking Conor O'Callaghan in the first half, Kieran Kilkenny in the second, done a tremendous job in both halves. So it will be interesting to see what happens there with Mayo's defence. Does Oisin Mullen start? What kind of an impact will he have in the game? It will be interesting. Lee Keegan tends to turn up in All-Ireland finals and tends to get a goal and certainly have an impact in the game, so that will be an interesting factor as well. And there's so much going to be happening all across the pitch. There really is. So in terms of my prediction then, wow, here we go, a prediction in the All-Ireland final. Could it be a draw? Because there won't be penalties. Actually, I only found out the other day this will actually go to a replay if there's a draw, and it probably would be. It'd be so funny, wouldn't it, if this was a draw and went to a replay after the GAA kind of pushing the game back and doing everything they could, and then they, it goes to a draw, and all of a sudden you don't have club championships that can get played. It'd just be it'd be a little bit funny, to be perfectly honest, and a bit of a disaster. But yeah, Mayo and Tyrone, I don't think it will be a draw. I don't think it'll be a draw after extra time. I do think Tyrone will win this game, and I do think they will be All-Ireland champions. As I said before, I want Mayo to win, but I do think that Tyrone, they've been more impressive for the majority of the All-Ireland Championship, in my opinion. Against Donegal, they were brilliant. Fair enough, right? Donegal, Michael Murphy misses that penalty, and then they go, 5 points. If Michael Murphy scores that, I think they would have went 5 points up or something like that. And obviously, Tyrone then go down the other end, score. Obviously, Michael Murphy gets sent off. Who knows how that game would have went? But I think Tyrone have been very impressive this year. They've been more impressive than Mayo have been in the Championship, in my opinion, because I think Mayo have had, stages and games where they've been really poor. First half against Galway, and obviously first half against Dublin as well, and obviously up until really about 60 minutes or so. And Tyrone have had a few stages as well where they've looked poor. They were okay against Cavan. They done what was needed in that game. Against Monaghan in the second half, they certainly got a bit nervy going down the home stretch. They allowed Monaghan to come back into the game, and I suppose that will be something Mayo will look at. Even if Tyrone have a big lead, maybe Mayo will be able to claw their way back into it. And against Kerry, I don't think Kerry were dreadful or terrible or really poor, and they weren't as bad as what some people were saying, but Tyrone were just really good, and I think they used the chances on the counter-attack very, very well. I think their game plan will work against Mayo if they do something similar as well, and I just think that they have more players in their team that can hurt Mayo than Mayo can hurt Tyrone. I really do. I think Tyrone have it within them to win this game, and I'm not saying Tyrone will win this game because of the Mayo curse and blah blah blah, Mayo lose All-Ireland finals, all the rest. I just genuinely feel that Tyrone will win this game. I just think they will be better, and I think they, for Tyrone, this is bonus territory in many ways. For Mayo, if they lose this game, there'll be that narrative again about losing All-Ireland finals and all the rest, and and I personally, I don't agree with that either. I don't think I don't necessarily agree with that one either. I still think Mayo have a lot of good young players coming through, and I still think over the next couple of years they'll be thereabouts. Whereas if Tyrone lose this final, I think it will be first year under Brian Dooher, Fergal Logan. They've overachieved by getting to an All-Ireland final. a huge step in the right direction, beating Kerry, massive progress. I still think Mayo have made progress, but I think for Tyrone, like considering where they were last year, I think it's more progress. So, I think for Tyrone, I just think they're going into this with bonus territory, and I think their game plan will work. I think they'll cause problems for the Mayo defence. I think they'll lure Mayo onto them as well. And I think Tyrone will do it. I really do. I think they will win the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. We'll show a score graphic on screen right now. And like what I said before, I do think it'll be low scoring. So I think Tyrone will win the game by a scoreline of 110 to 11 points. So yeah, that's the prediction anyways. And look, listen, for any Mayo fans who are maybe screaming at the telly right now, I've got the majority of predictions wrong this year, to be fair. I mean, I did think Tyrone would lose to Donegal. And here they are in an All-Ireland final. I thought they'd lose to Kerry as well, and here they are in a final, and I thought Dublin would beat Mayo, and that didn't happen either. So maybe me predicting Tyrone is actually a good thing for Mayo fans. I don't know, but we'll wait and see what happens. But I am going to go with a Tyrone victory, and obviously do bear in mind this is just my prediction. But feel free to let me know down in the comments below who you think will win the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship for 2021. So there we go. Anyways, that's the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship prediction and preview. There will be an extended preview out tomorrow. Podcast, an hour and a half chat between myself and Daniel Hussey of Tackling Sport. We really delve more into the Mayo Tyrone game, some of the battles they've had down the years. We discussed a little bit about Dublin as well, and obviously where it went wrong there. And yeah, we just have a general chat about Mayo and Tyrone and the All-Ireland Senior Football Championship. We discussed the whole Pat Spillane situation as well, and have Tyrone being disrespected and whatnot. We kind of go into that in further detail, and obviously give both our predictions as well. So yeah, so there we have it. Do let me know down in the comments below what you thought of the video. What are your predictions? Is there any big points I've missed? Obviously the bench, maybe that's kind of something I didn't discuss maybe enough. Do Mayo probably have a better bench? Maybe. But then again, Tyrone could have Colin McShane and Dereck Hannivan coming off the bench. So that's another interesting one as well. And yeah, I mean, a lot of permutations going into it. A lot of interesting facts. And like what I said before, I am predicting Tyrone to win it. But to be perfectly honest, that's not, that is that 100% of me saying Tyrone's going to win it? Absolutely not. It's probably about 55-60% of me, to be honest. I still feel like Mayo could easily do it as well, and it's just such a hard game to call. But yeah, do let me know down in the comments below what you think. Who will win the All-Ireland final? For me, it'll be Tyrone, but yeah, we'll see what happens. There will be a watch-along stream happening on Saturday as well, so do stay tuned for that. Match reactions, fan interviews, podcasts, absolutely everything happening after the game. So do stay tuned for that as well, and I'll see you all later.